language, having a willingness to step back after contributing so that others can participate, and being patient as technical issues may arise. So my name's Kayla. I'm on the Farmer Services team, and I am happy to be the Georgia Organics host and representative on this event today. Very happy to hear what all the amazing panelists and our presenter has to say, and we'll get right into an overview of the agenda. So we have, first we're going to start off with a presentation from Dr. Gabrielle Roesch-McNally of the American Farmland Trust, who is the Woman for the Land director there. After that, folks will have a time to have a question and answer session with Dr. Gabrielle Roesch-McNally. And if you have questions, please feel free to put them in the chat. We will probably not be able to get to all of them, but we'll get to some of them. So make it a good question because maybe you'll get picked. Right after that, we'll go into a moderated discussion with our panelists. If you could change to the other slide, Emmy. We've got 3 incredible women farmers located here in Georgia who are going to share some of their experiences. Today, we have Whitney Jaye from Sunbird Flowers, located in Lithonia, Georgia. We've got Monica Ponce from Love Cooperative Farm in Mansfield, Georgia, and Ilana Richards from Levity Farms in Madison, Georgia. So we'll get to hear from them later. So after that panel is over, we'll do a breakout session where you're going to be able to ask our lovely farmers any questions, and that'll kind of act as our Q&A, and then we'll close out. So I'm going to pass it over to Dr. Gabrielle Roesch-McNally, and as she's getting settled with the technology, we're going to flash a poll up on the screen that kind of gives us an understanding of who's in the room and what we at Georgia Organics can do to make sure that we get the right people in the room. So answer, and then we'll see the answers after that.
Go ahead and share my screen and get it ready while you're doing the poll. Can you just let me know, can you all see my presentation?
Yes.
Okay, awesome.
So the poll results will be closing. Poll will be closing soon, and we'll see those results. I'm going to check out where we got people calling in from in the chat. Georgia, Wisconsin, Oregon, some farm to school folks, Athens. Thanks, y'all. We're going to give the poll one more minute or so. All right, we got the poll results up. So it looks like we have a pretty even split between the food community and farmers and some eaters as well. We've got a good range of 0 to 3 farmers and 6 to 10, which is great. Beginning and also folks with a lot of knowledge. mostly urban representation here, but a little rural, so important that y'all are here to share your perspectives. Mostly women, which is awesome. Happy to see some other non-binary folks, including myself, and a few men, which is really important to have men hear women's perspectives in this field. So that's awesome. And with that, I'm going to pass it over to Gabrielle. Take it away.
Awesome. All right. Well, thank you so much for the introduction and just the opportunity to be here with you all today. I am, as I said in the chat, an interloper because I am not based in Georgia. I work for American Farmland Trust and I serve a national role, and I'm actually based in the Pacific Northwest in Oregon State, just south of Portland, for those of you who've heard of us. But it's lovely to be here. I'm so excited to hear from the farmers on the panel discussion today. My work is in service of and in partnership with the women farmers, landowners, and aspiring farmers across the country. This image that starts our slides off is a group of women who joined a peer-to-peer learning circle that we conducted in Kentucky, just outside of Louisville. So just a shout out to all the folks who really make our program what it is, and who are kind of booing me here today. So lovely to be here and to really, I hope, just set a container for our conversation, provide a little bit of broader context to, I think, what our panelists will really be kind of grounding for you today. Just a little bit more on my organization. So I work for American Farmland Trust, and we are a 40-plus-year-old organization now. And our work has been around protecting farmland. That's really where we got started. If you've seen the bumper stickers, no farms, no food, those are ours. And we have really kind of advanced our work thinking about promoting more ecological, environmentally friendly farming, a lot of work in the climate resilience space. And then, of course, we think a lot about and devote work to keeping farmers on the land and helping think about the transition of farmland between generations, and ideally to a more diverse group of folks as agriculture continues to evolve. And many folks here are aware just the level of sea change that is happening in agriculture as we have many people who are aging out of the career and looking at a lot of land that potentially could change hands in the next decade or so. So critical to be here and having these conversations. Our Women for the Land initiative, sometimes I'll refer to it as WFL, if you hear me say that. You know, we do a lot of work, but synthesizing this kind of effort to power, or at least help people tap into their own power, which is a better way of framing that. Women, landowners, and again, those aspiring farmers to both protect their land, embrace conservation, resilience, and to support their success, and whether that's sort of from a community level perspective and beyond. So I wanted to just kind of give you a little bit more of a flavor of kind of why my program exists. I'm guessing most people came here because they recognize that inequality across race, gender, economic, and beyond reasons sort of impact our society, but it definitely happens in agriculture as well. And so our program really kind of thinks about what are the unique challenges that women face in agriculture in particular. But because we're still kind of coming on the heels, and perhaps not so much the heels of a global pandemic that is not seemingly done with any of us just yet, I thought it was important just to kind of to ground us in this thing that we've all been living through in different ways. And to acknowledge how much of an impact it's had on women in particular, not just women in agriculture, but women writ large in our society here in the US, but of course globally as well. Some of these numbers are probably, you know, not giving a full picture of women leaving a job due to pandemic related reasons, and women have been leaving the workforce at higher levels than their male counterparts. Family caregiving, before and of course after and during, or I should say during the pandemic, has largely fallen on women. When we see kind of, you know, this quote here is about sort of global challenges that impact, pandemics, climate change, broader systems of war. We find that rural women in particular face these sort of challenges, and they exacerbate issues related to food security, nutrition, drive poverty, or limit impacts to healthcare, and just generally limit economic opportunities, as well as sort of driving issues related to gender-based violence. We saw that in the US with increase in gender-based violence during the pandemic. So all that to say that, as we deal with life stressors, we know that whatever sources of inequality exist in our society, they often get even more impacted, and more pressures placed on those communities during times of challenges for everyone. And then just an important note about mental and physical health. And I think we've heard a lot about the physical impacts of COVID, but also thinking about that sort of mental health and how deeply women and young girls in particular experience mental health crises during the pandemic. So again, that's all swirling around. So then let's think about agriculture. These are the kind of I'm going to kind of make us all sad for a minute, and then I promise to sort of bring us back up again. But one of the reasons that our program came to life is this recognition that women face barriers and continue to face barriers in agriculture. So some of the quotes here that you see on these slides are quotes from women who've joined our programs. So this is about sort of navigating resources as women navigate resources to support their farming enterprises. Many women have faced both kind of tacit and very overt forms of discrimination. They feel like there's some kind of secret society. They have to kind of go to their advisors and partners and remind them that they're the landowners or the principal operators, not their husbands or spouses. It's a good old boys type of thing. We're the new kid on the block, so we're just not taken seriously enough. And that is something that is echoed wherever I work in the country. And additionally, for some women kind of coming into land ownership or land management after the loss of a spouse or a partner. And then obviously, folks who are choosing agriculture to do by themselves or in partnership in other constellations. So all that to say that we know that women continue to face barriers. Women access federal resources at a much lower rate than their male counterparts, and that's true for women of color even more so. So we know when it just comes to kind of accessing resources to support the success of your farm, whether that's financial, technical, informational resources, that is happening less for women and less for women of color. And honestly, for folks who are non-binary or queer identifying, there's not really good data, but I would wager to guess those trends are similar. So I just wanted to sort of raise a few issues around kind of that intersection of different identities that people have and sort of how they form these more structural barriers. So thinking about gender, recent research kind of looking at farming in particular as being one of the most unequal professions in the US today, and not just related to farmers and landowners, but farm workers and everyone kind of involved in the agriculture system, how deeply unequal it continues to be when we compare it to maybe other sectors of the economy. Women-run farms generally on average are operating smaller acreages, but even when we account for differences in operation size, women are earning 40% less income than farms operated by men. Again, similar threads we see in other parts of the economy, but happening in agriculture as well. Women-led farms are also the most impacted by lack of access to childcare and a lot of these intersecting challenges associated with rurality as well, that sometimes kind of impact folks' ability to access care for children or perhaps elders as well. And then, this is just a little snapshot of sort of like some of the structural barriers for farmers of color, landowners of color. We could talk a lot of time, but I don't actually have much time to talk to you. So I just wanted to highlight that, heirs property issues with fractionated land ownership deeply impact many low-income communities, but particularly Southern-owned Black land. And it's estimated, nearing 4 million acres of land across the South, Georgia included, is sort of held in this heirs property dynamic that leads to greater bifurcation of land and land loss by Black farmers and other farmers of color. We know about a great deal of discrimination that has happened in the past, largest civil rights payout in this Pigford versus Glickman dealing with FSA or Farm Service Agency discrimination. Sometimes people like to paint that as in the past. We know that there's still work being done at USDA to right the ship, as it were, to address historical and current day discrimination of farmers of color, women as well. And then I think, just in the context of folks who identify as African American and many other communities of color who've lost their land ownership or their land holdings over the last century, and all the wealth that's accumulated there. Of course, we could spend a lot more time in all of this discussion, but I just wanted to raise, I think, some points that are really important to think about the structure of agriculture that we're dealing with and the ways in which that impacts women and communities of color disproportionate to their white male counterparts. When we think about Georgia, I just want to highlight a couple statistics based on this is Census Ag census data. 94% of ag producers identify as white in Georgia, and that's actually lower. So there are more farmers of color in Georgia when we compare that to the national average. Around nearly 30% of the principal producers are women. That's about even as elsewhere in the country. And then, very few farms are certified organic. Actually, that's not just certified, that's sort of folks who identify as organic or certified. I know there's a lot of gray room or gray area in there. And I know since a lot of you are probably interested in organics, as just kind of want to highlight some of those lessons learned, or not lessons learned, but just some of the context of Georgia in particular. So I wanted to just kind of share a couple slides about things that we're doing that kind of give me hope, that provide a context of ways that we can kind of contend with some of these more structural and systemic barriers that limit women and women of color and folks who have been historically underserved, folks who've been marginalized and oppressed, how those things continue to be an undercurrent in our agricultural systems, and ways that we, at least our program, and partners are working to kind of shift some of that. So one of our big pieces of work is around building power and networks, connecting women to one another through what we call learning circles. We have some efforts of this going on in Kentucky and North Carolina and Virginia. Those are the closest places, and elsewhere across the country. Would love to do more of this work in Georgia, but really connecting women to one another, to resource providers, and helping them access resources that will support the success of their operation. I have a quote here that was based again on one of these sessions we did in Kentucky recently, about just how life-giving these connections and community engagement is, and how deeply we have seen kind of the impacts of our programming just by connecting women to other women and to other women resource providers to help them kind of make changes or take action on their land. Just knowing that they're not alone and feeling more confident to access the resources that are there for them to access. So and I'll share later about ways you can kind of connect with our programming, but really know how important it is to create that space that is focused on women, and increasingly women and non-binary folks that come together to learn from each other and share. I share a story here just about sort of the emphasis on prioritizing land and family, to the point a bit about issues with heirs property and that fractionated land ownership. We have an awesome partner, Carrie Martin, who runs Footprints in the Garden in North Carolina and is one of our partners at the Black Family Land Trust. And her farm story is a lot about how to bring the family back to one piece of land with a lot of different farm operations that bring in different revenue streams for different members of the family who lead and operate. She's got work in CSA and vegetable production. One of her, I think it's siblings, has sows and has a whole sort of like livestock operation. Her daughter's coming back on to do more like agritourism work. And all that to say, I think there's a lot of success and interest in sort of building this sort of more diverse, either family or maybe communal shared kind of management and ownership of different farm enterprises on the same land. And then finally, I wanted to sort of share something not specifically that American Farmland Trust or Women for the Land was a part of, but really thinking because land access I know is going to come up today as a theme. One of the things that we've seen in particular when it comes to women is, there is a disproportionate amount of land in the US. I shouldn't say disproportionate, but a very large amount of land, depending on where you're looking. In the US, it's owned by women, but that's not actively managed by women. So in some places, it's as high as 50% of agricultural land is owned by women, but rented out. And so we know that women own land, predominantly white women across the country, and sometimes are interested in making that land accessible to a next generation and helping break down barriers with land access. So this is an example of a woman landowner who is connected to in the Puget Sound in Washington State, their agrarian commons, and gifted land to the commons to be used to support more creative land access options for predominantly BIPOC communities. And that's just one example. Again, I'm not taking any credit for that work. We had nothing to do with it, but I know some of the conversations here today are like creative ways to think about accessing land as that being a huge stumbling block barrier to folks being able to get involved in agriculture, and that we know that women are leading in thinking creatively about making some of their land resources more accessible to the next generation of farming. I think there's a lot more potential there between women landholders and land seekers and aspiring farmers. And some of our work at AFT and Women for the Land is exploring building more connections across those lines. So I will stop there. I want to share just a slide with, if it'll show up, oops. I think I saw a comment, someone wants to know if I can share slides. I'm happy to do that. I do have a resource slide where some of the data that isn't coming from us, where that's coming from. I do just want to point out, you're welcome to reach out to me about any of these issues, but I also have a new staff member who we just hired for the Southeast. Actually, I saw Nicole log on, so I know she's here in the webinar verse, and Nicole Washiri, and she's our new Southeast program manager for Women for the Land, and you've got her email there as well. She's based in Kentucky, but certainly closer than I am in Oregon. So again, so wonderful to be here. I don't know if I ate too much into my time, but it's great. I can't wait to hear from the panelists. And again, happy to be in touch. And I guess we do have a little bit of time for Q&A.
Thank you so much, Dr. Roesch-McNally. That was awesome. So we have a few questions coming in from the chat, and you already mentioned that folks can read the study with the findings that you had through the resource page on the slideshow that will get sent out to presenters. So if folks are interested, you can read that soon. And a question that we have is that acreage and profitability statistic for commodity crop acreage versus specialty crop acreage?
I'm guessing that is in reference to my comment about the difference in income. Is that?
Yes,
okay.
I believe so.
Yeah, I think from this study. And can you read the question one more time? Sorry.
Yeah, that's okay. Is that acreage and profitability statistic for commodity crop acreage versus specialty crop acreage?
I'd have to go back to the original study. I think it's kind of broader. So if you look at, there's a lot of different ways you can parse out this like women run farms. So, and the ag census has changed the way that we categorize. It's a little confusing. The most recent agricultural census enabled folks to add more people who were sort of decision makers on the farm, which actually boosted the amount of women who are like involved in agricultural decision making. But that is somewhat distinct from principal operators, which is usually kind of what's used as sort of a proxy for women run farms. So they're like women who are principal operators, which is kind of distinct from a principal operator that might be a man, but has women who are managers or decision makers. So anyhow, that's just to say that I believe this is coming from across all of those. But when you look at what those like principal operator farms that are women, they tend to be smaller on average, so are much less involved in commodity enterprises in general. So the 40% less income question, I'd have to look back to see if that included commodity, like it included the whole universe. I believe it did. But we also know that women just generally are not running those operations at the same level as their male counterparts.
Got it. Thank you so much. Someone had a question about what areas of the US have the Women of the Land initiative.
Yeah, we have active programming. Like I said, in the Southeast, we're working in North Carolina, Virginia, and Kentucky in particular right now. We've got some work in New York, in Pennsylvania. We've got in Massachusetts, a little bit in Iowa and other parts of the Midwest, California, and the Pacific Northwest. And so, our programming, takes a slightly different flavor depending on where we are. There's some other organizations, who are doing work in the space. Always give a shout out to Women Food and Ag Network that also, works nationally and has a big footprint in the Midwest. And then, a lot of states have regional, or I should say state-run kind of women in ag networks that sometimes, gather women in different ways, usually through like an annual conference. I don't know that Georgia has one. I know Kentucky has a pretty active Women in Ag conference. Although I would say some of those tend to be, I think there's a real shift in terms of like who shows up to some of those and whether or not they're, serving the interests of all women in agriculture and in the states that they exist in.
We got two other questions. I'm not sure where we are on time, but I go ahead with the first one from Matthew. Do you have any data to suggest that women-owned farms are more likely to utilize newer technologies like online farmers markets or CSAs, and thus stand to benefit more from deploying rural broadband?
That's a cool question.
Yeah.
And
really ties it all together.
Yeah, I know that a lot of our partners are really passionate about and working in the policy realm around broadband access, and obviously an issue that affects all rural communities. And if the individual who's asking that question wants to email me, I'd be happy to talk a little bit more offline about that. I think what I do know is a lot more women, disproportionately the Economic Research Service, ERS, has done some work on kind of that small and underserved producer category, and women and communities of color are disproportionately sort of represented in those kind of smaller, more under-resourced producer groups. And so, but those folks tend to be doing more direct marketing and doing more kind of community food, what I call community food security work, like that direct to market and direct to kind of consumer production. So I would agree with the statement. Most likely the question, I think that there's probably a lot of truth to that and a lot of interest in just tools in general about that sort of direct to market and direct to consumer production that women tend to be leading in, as opposed to sort of these larger commodity production systems. But I'd be happy to riff a little bit more with that individual about those ideas.
Matthew's a great person to riff with. So we got another question. Do you have any of your own experiences that have inspired you to do this work?
Oh, yeah, it's a great question. Yeah, I do. I think a lot of times people ask me how I got involved. I've been involved in agriculture for pretty much my entire career, and yet I grew up, I'm a big gardener in my life, and I've worked on farms before, but I never try to sell myself as a farmer. But I've been working in the kind of agriculture adjacent world for as long as I have been an adult, and in some shape or form. And I I all connect it back to my grandmother, who was not a farmer. And, you know, I'd say my family sees me as a bit of the sort of odd one out, because I follow agriculture when it's not always the most lucrative or the most, you know, connected to sort of my family's priorities. Like, why are you doing this? And I sort of blame my grandmother and the matriarch of my family for taking me to farms on Long Island, back when there were a lot more farms on Long Island in New York, where my family's from, picking strawberries at U-Pick, putting up food in my own garden, putting up food in my grandmother's kitchen, and learning how to can, and sort of that connection to food security, and the powerful role that I think women play, that I know women play in feeding their communities, their families, and sustaining the land. So I think those like early, you know, picking berries with my grandmother, and making jam and making bread, and it inspired me to love food and love agriculture, and to kind of put my work in service of supporting folks who are in the soil of it all. And that continues to inspire me. And yeah, I could tell lots of stories about kind of the women producers that we work with, and I think some of the impacts that we've had programmatically, but I think the power of that has really been facilitating connections and relationships with people. And the more that we create a container for people to do that effectively and successfully, amazing things happen, and women find resources with each other, access grants, you know, loans sometimes, you know, connections with mentors, communities, and learn and share from one another. And so we just play a part in helping facilitate those connections, but those absolutely inspire me every day.
That's awesome. Thank you for sharing that personal experience. So we got a question from Lauren. We have some really amazing livestock women farmers in Georgia, lucky to have them. As you see the trends in these studies year over year, do you think that this is a space for women that is expanding?
Yeah, I think that's an awesome question, and I absolutely think so. And I'd be interested to look at some of the data and see if any of that has tracked. It's hard, like I noted, this weirdness with the agricultural census, which is what like one of the biggest sort of data sources to track changes in agriculture, has never done a good job of serving women, serving communities of color. So those data have always been a little circumspect. Sorry to any USDA folks who are on the line, but I think most people would agree, and has done the best to serve big USDA commodity programs and folks who farm for those programs. That said, I'd say for sure, anecdotally, through the relationships that we've had, livestock and small ruminants and poultry have been a huge interest in terms of like workshops. And we've actually been having some discussions internally about, you know, there's some big USDA funding around climate smart commodity production systems. And, you know, some of it is like large livestock and beef production, and thinking, you know, women in particular. And I would say, from my understanding of a lot of communities of color, that the smaller livestock production systems are so important and a great source of potential revenue and integration with like diversified operations, and tend to be like under-resourced in terms of like loans and grants that sort of are driving engagement with those markets. But I absolutely see the folks who are like in it the most are farmers of color and women producers as well.
Great. Connie is wondering, she is a woman veteran in Georgia and working hard to join the ranks of women farmers. Can you recommend any pathways or programs to help set us up for success?
I will definitely let some folks from Georgia maybe respond. The only thing I would just say, we've got some women veteran programming, not here yet. We have a really exciting women and veteran program in the Northwest. But there is the Farmer Veteran Coalition that is a great resource for folks who identify as veterans and or have been in service, and women veterans in particular do not access resources for veterans at the rate of their male counterparts. And That's a great resource, as well as Agribility, and some of the resources they have developed for folks who are veterans and other folks with kind of disabilities as well. So, and I will also let Georgia folks want to speak to any kind of resources more locally. I see some coming up here.
Yeah, if you look in the chat, Connie, we've got NCAT and Arm to Farm suggested, as well as Stag Vets in Milledgeville, Georgia. And I'm sure in like general feedback on being set up for success will hopefully come up naturally through the panel as well. And my advice is just to expand your community and ask questions, and learn from other women farmers who are doing this. And with that, I think and so many people are putting some more resources in the chat, or that was you actually, Dr. Roesch-McNally, but amazing. That was a great Q&A and presentation. Thank you so much for sharing your knowledge with us. Yes, you can also look into getting support from the accelerator program at Georgia Organics. So I'm going to get us into this panel, and I would recommend folks to put their view into speaker so that we can see the panelists. And I think that's correct technologically. Could I get a reminder? Is it speaker or gallery? That's best.
So you could do speaker, but you could also pin people. You could pin them.
Got it. Yeah. Emmy, would you mind pinning myself and the panelists? And while that's going on, I'll just give a reminder of who we're going to be speaking to today. We've got Whitney Jaye from Sunbird Flowers in Lithonia, Georgia. Monica Ponce from Love Cooperative Farm in Mansfield, Georgia, and Ilana Richards from Levity Farms in Madison, Georgia. And I'm just gonna start us off. So for everyone, I would love to hear about where you got to where you are now and how you got there. And I'm seeing Monica first to the right of me. So I'm going to pass it over to Monica, and you can just pass it to the next person when you feel ready. And as a reminder, if you have questions, you're going to have time to ask them during the breakout. Yep. Go ahead, Monica.
Thanks. Now that you've called me, my dogs want to talk.
Okay.
I'm so sorry.
It's okay.
I hope they will chill out. I got to where I started undergrad. I'm so sorry.
Hey, why don't we pass it over to someone else and let them quiet down for a second. So
Thank you.
Feel good. Whitney, I'm going to pass it over to you.
Sure. Can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Okay. So the question was basically how we got to where we are now. And this question is always so funny because a lot of times when you tell people you're a farmer, they're just like, so you grew up on a farm. Like folks are really looking for a very linear, how you got to where you are. And I love to uplift to people that my path to this work has been very nonlinear. Just to show the various ways that we come into this work. So in the Black farming landscape, we use a phrase to describe, part of what's been my journey. We call ourselves returning generation farmers, but it's basically a way to describe what it means to connect our paths as farmers and as land stewards to a longer continuum of an agrarian legacy that we come from. And so like many other returning generation farmers, I found myself in college at the University of Georgia a little more than 10 years ago, surrounded by all these opportunities to, test it out, said it to a couple of people out loud, and the rest is history. Because I left college after graduating and bounced around, farm hopped for a while. But I think, making that very intentional and conscious decision to, walk the path as a farmer. And I think in the time since then, I've spent years honing my knowledge and skill as a farmer and then as a farmer organizer through various organizational formations, and then started, my own little farm with my family, which we've been stewarding for about 5 years now. So a bit of a windy road, but definitely one for me that is tied to my lineage and heritage, and that's allowed me to reclaim that.
Thank you so much, Whitney. That was a beautiful answer, and thank you for sharing that terminology as well. I'll pass it over to Ilana.
You didn't know you were getting a bonus panelist today.
Oh my God, hello, Harlan.
This is Harlan. It's actually very appropriate that she popped up right now, because my start in farming really came from my desire to, I really wanted to raise a family, and I wanted to figure out a way to raise a family with a business and a lifestyle that would be most beneficial and cater most to having a family. So Zach and I were friends for a while, and after I graduated, got my undergraduate degree in a field that has no I guess some relation to farming, but I had no idea that I was going to live on a farm. And I went to go visit Zach at a farm a permaculture farm in North Georgia, where he was working. And he and I, we had just been friends up until that point, and we were on this farm. He invited me to come see it, and there was the farmer and his wife and their daughter. So the farmer and his wife had an off-farm job, but they were all living on the farm together and raising a daughter. And Zach and I just talked about how much that lifestyle made sense and was very much in alignment with our personal values. And we just kind of looked at each other and decided, well, should we start a farm together? And then we just kind of figured it out and rented land for a little while, and eventually bought property. And here we are, manifesting that family that we talked about.
That's awesome. I love that that was kind of like the intention that set you on this journey, and you ended up here. And I know you fell in love with food and farming along the way too. So that's really awesome.
There's so much more to this lifestyle that is awesome. In addition to having a family, that's the center of it. But that was probably, if I had to choose one place where the reason I got to where I am now is because I wanted to cultivate a life that was centered around family in that way.
That's awesome. And Monica, how are your dogs doing? I know they're your babies too, but
Yeah.
about babies.
One of them's very sad. The other one is happy that the puppy is put away. Sorry, I'm so sorry about that. I guess my journey, I feel like kind of started in college and undergrad. I studied anthropology, and I really enjoyed learning about diet and food and cultures and how they eat. And that was really interesting to me. And I felt like my path going towards anthropology of food. But in the meantime, it's college. So it's like, but what do I do? So I started volunteering on farms, and then I started working on farms, and decided to go back to school for horticulture. And I wasn't quite sure if I wanted to be a farmer. so I thought I'd study horticulture, and maybe I'll just like do irrigation for farms or something. I don't know. But then I just kept falling back into farming and really love the work. I was passionate about, sustainability, all the like, hippie college kid, environmentalism, food and social justice issues, and access to food, access to good quality food. But then I also found the work very, like, on a personal level, very grounding and emotionally grounding for me, very healing, just with, anxiety or traumas and whatnot that I was going through, or, you just go through. I found the work just very grounding for me. So yeah, lots of reasons. I bounced around working on different farms, managing other people's farms, people who didn't know how to farm, and people who were like farmers themselves, and being their assistant. And it eventually led me to Love Cooperative Farm. My partner and I, we were looking to start our own farm, alongside some friends of ours who were looking to scale up. And we were all just kind of chit-chatting as friends, like, oh, well, we want to do this and we want to do this. And it's like, wow, it sounds like we want to do very similar things. Should we just be like siloed is the word that's coming to mind, or should we just join forces and come together and work cooperatively, and kind of share the labor, share the risks, share our resources, share our knowledge. So that's kind of how we got involved with Love is Love, and Love is Love became Love is Love Cooperative Farm. So yeah.
It's amazing. And for those who aren't familiar with Love is Love, they have an incredible plant sale every year, and they just had their first one at the new property, or their first spring plant sale at the new property on Saturday. And I'm a former employee at Love is Love, so I obviously wanted to go out and see it, and it was beautiful. And congratulations on that, all of the hard work that y'all have done to get it up and running. So kudos.
Thank you.
I wanted to actually ask our moms on the panel a question about balancing motherhood with farm work. And Whitney, so this is Ilana and Whitney, by the way. And Whitney, I know that you also have a full-time job. So I'm curious to both of you, Ilana and Whitney, how did becoming a mother affect your perspective and relationship with farming, if at all? And I'll pass it to whoever wants to go first.
Okay. I comes before W in the alphabet, I guess. So, okay, I'll go first. So like I said, we basically started the farm with the intention of bringing a family up there. But even with that being said, I feel like all of the books and YouTube videos and field experience can never prepare you for what it's like to want to be, to give all of your energy into two places, the farm and my child, soon to be children. So it's different now. I mean, when Zach and I started the farm, it was just the two of us, and we were both, roughing it day in, day out, doing what we had to do to get it going, so we could grow and earn enough to get us to the next stage, and then just keep moving along and building the business and looking for land. And when you're just a couple of 20 and early 30 something year olds with no kids, you can eat sardines 3 meals a day, and be totally fine. But when kids become involved, you want to give them maybe a little bit more comforts. But now that we have purchased land and we're on our what we're calling our forever farm, we're able to focus more on long-term, like farmstead and family goals that really incorporate Harlan and our future kids more. So that's my answer. It's kind of changed our focus from growing as much food as possible and growing a business as much as possible to figuring out ways to make this more sustainable and really enjoyable for our family in the long run.
Yeah.
Implementing some permaculture practices and orchard spaces, eventually animal systems. So it's still our business, it's still our enterprise, but now it's also, I mean, it's our home. So
Thank you, Ilana. Yeah, I think you're really speaking to just like how much strategy and critical thinking goes into planning like your family along, growing your farm business, and the delicate balance that that has. And just like the day to day, like every day is like, okay, I have to harvest, but I also need to make sure that Harlan is entertained. And how can I do that at the exact same time? I know some of the farmers I work with will bring the car seat into the field with them, have the baby there. So it's like a puzzle all the time. I bet.
those little kiddie pools are great in the summertime because you can fill them up with water and then just like pull the kids around the field to different areas. Pro tip. So, but I like to think about it as we didn't like start the farm and then later on have a kid and say, how are we going to integrate parenthood into farming? We came from the idea of parenthood and then we thought, okay, well, how can we create the situation that would be basically work the farm around the kid? But again, even with that forethought, it's just brand new challenges and surprises, and you can only be so prepared for life.
Absolutely. Whitney, can I pass it on over to you?
For sure. I feel like all of that resonated with me. The line where you said, it went from being about growing as much food as we possibly can to being about how do we make this sustainable. Oof, it jumped off the screen. So for me, for us, it's a very similar thing. I think one of the differences might be that, Brandon, my husband, comes to the work in a much different way than me. So a lot of the farming or like the leadership around the farming really comes, from me and my body. And so, the ways that pregnancy, the ways that childbirth, the ways that recovery, all of that shifted our plan, just meant that motherhood, for me at least, and how that meshed with the business had to, a lot of things had to change, a lot of plans had to shift. And for me, it was just like, that's the priority, similar to you naming working it around the child or them needing or you wanting them to have certain comforts. So yeah, I think it's a puzzle being in such a physically demanding line of work, and also, parenthood or motherhood for me being so physically demanding, and figuring out how to make it sustainable and work. And I don't have the answers in that I have a 2-year-old and I'm learning. And we made some business decisions to shift our business in a way that made sense for us, based off of the real demands and needs of raising a 2-year-old in a pandemic. And we learn as we go, but I think the biggest thing has been like having the community support or having familial support. Our property happens to be, multiple members of our family live on it. And so that's been, a game changer in terms of being able to get outside or have a break. But, it's still unfolding in our case. So there's, like Ilana said, there's always a new challenge. There's always something to learn. And we are taking it as it comes.
Yeah, it seems like you not only accept, but also embrace all of those challenges as best that you can, with a fair amount of enthusiasm, which is really inspiring to see. So thank you for just living your life. Really appreciate it. So I wanted to ask Monica a question. Monica, I know that your mother is a business owner as well. How did her influence contribute to you becoming a farmer?
I think I got my passion for food from my mom. She is a partner in a Mexican restaurant, and she was always cooking things off the menu for us and staff, and really like taught me what like real food was. And where she's from, like food wasn't ever frozen, food wasn't canned. My grandfather and uncles had a farm too, and you would just like go pick sugar cane off and just have a snack. And so I think like my passion for food came from her, but also like on the business side of stuff, like her attention to detail, like I think I get a lot of that from her, and just really dialing in systems, like fixing things, like how to just like tweak things to make it better, make the systems work better, make it run smoother, learning from all your mistakes, like okay, what are we going to do better next year, and all those things. And like she would empower herself to teach like whatever she needed to learn. Like she didn't go to college or anything. She didn't write a business plan, like, but she would just teach herself, like, okay, this is what I got to learn now. I got to go to City Hall and figure this out and do it. And so I feel like that's kind of, I don't know. I think when I'm having a really hard time, I just think it's like, well, mom could figure it out. You got to figure it out now. But lately too, just in our conversations, and just, I think she's reaching retirement. She's ready to retire. And I just see the burnout that she has now in her life. And I think she's also been reflecting too, like, like she would spend day in and day out in the restaurants, and just like what's her quality of life and what she's looking forward to now and what she wants to do. And I think about that too every day, like, and I kind of hear her like whispering in my ear too, like, don't forget your quality of life, don't just make it all about the work day in and day out. And in a way, like, she showed me that. And I think now that she's like reaching her retirement and like reflecting on her life and wondering how it was balanced and the injuries that she's had and whatnot, and just like I kind of hear the like reading in between the lines in our conversations of like, don't lose yourself in the work too, so yeah, mom's pretty big role model.
Amazing. She sounds awesome, and I bet her food is so good.
Yeah.
Well, we only have about 5 minutes left in this panel. Unfortunately, as the panelists know, I have a lot of questions that I sent them to be prepared for. So I'm sad that we can't get to all of them, but I did want to ask about being in community with other women for all of the panelists. Curious about how important having community with other women in farming is for you, and also how you've been able to cultivate that in your own lives, if you have been able to. And I'll send it back to Ilana.
I would say that community is extremely important, and to me, because it gets hard and it can feel kind of lonely sometimes, like your experience feels very unique, particularly as a mother on a farm. And it's, we just moved out here within the last year, so we're working on building community. I'm meeting some fellow agricultural enthusiasts and some Oh, thank you. Some women farmers and some parent farmers, which is also very helpful. But probably and I'm not just blowing smoke right now, but really the strongest way that we've developed community in general with fellow farmers, let alone with other women farmers, is through Georgia Organics and conferences and cohorts and networking opportunities. I feel really grateful that we're farming in Georgia, partly because we just have great farmland in Georgia, but also because I get to participate in Georgia Organics events. There are other organizations around Atlanta and around Georgia that work really hard to connect farmers with other farmers. And I just feel really grateful to have found those groups, because it can be really lonely and difficult, and it can be disheartening, questioning all the time. Am I, as Monica said, trying to remember the work-life balance? So hearing other farmers say that and checking in with other growers and farmers, it's invaluable, really. I can't imagine doing this without any sense of community.
Well, stop, I'm blushing. No, it's so sweet, and we're so happy to be in community with y'all. Your passion and like appreciation, it's mutual. Like so grateful that y'all are doing what you're doing. Much love. And I'll send it over to Whitney to talk a little bit about being in community with other farmers and other women farmers.
Oh, it's been, it's just unimaginable where I would have been without it. I mean, I found sisterhood in this work that has really like surrounded me, and support and community and mentorship at really important times in this journey. I remember first landing, in the Atlanta area, and I was just blown to pieces by, the work that a lot of the Black women farmers were doing. And, they took me under their wing and, were extremely generous with their knowledge and networks and just overall nurture and care for, a young farmer that was showing up really wide open and ready. And so I'm also one of those, a farmer that once we connect, I'm latching on. So I've developed a lot of friendships and a lot of relationships with women farmers in the area and in the region. I think the other work I do outside of, farming supports that, just in terms of like organizing with other farmers and other land stewards. But it's been invaluable, to be honest. And I've developed a deep relationship with Keisha Cameron from High Hog Farm, to the point that we really view ourselves as like sister farms, and that has meant that we're able to share resources and generally navigate through this really strange systems of being, small farms in a food system that doesn't make a lot of sense together, and how that's, offered us community and just soft places to land as we navigate it. So yeah, sisterhood and finding relationships with other women farmers has really been invaluable. I'm reflecting on it now too, just who I thought I would be as a farmer before I met other women farmers who were like, no, there's many other possibilities for a life on land, and seeing them model that. And then, also hearing Ilana talk about family and Monica talk about, sharing resources. It's been really inspiring. So yeah.
Yeah, I really appreciate you naming like the care that other women farmers have given you and vice versa. And I think in general, like as I'm reflecting on the questions that I'm giving y'all, it is like a lot about care, like motherhood, like your mother, Monica, and like community, and like viewing those traits of femininity of this caregiving as really like beneficial and positive to farming experiences, whereas that can often be framed in like a negative way. And I'm grateful for us like being able to highlight the ways those soft parts benefit and contribute to the success of being farmers. And finally, we'll have Monica answer this question, and then y'all will have some time to connect with the panelists in breakout sessions, and we'll get that going after we close with Monica's answer.
I feel very similarly to everyone else, and that it is very important. And thinking about this question, it's like, it's been hard to cultivate it. Like, we all get busy and we get bogged down, and I've seen like little clubs or groups like come and go, and then everyone, there's a lot of energy behind like gathering, and then everyone just gets busy and life happens. But I've been really lucky to, develop friendships and, have some really, I guess like mentors that I can call to about like, what kind of tractor implement, like if I'm trying to do this, do you think that this would be okay? Or like, should I be looking for a different piece of equipment, or what's the spacing that you're doing on this? And other women farmers and non-binary farmers that have been like, just text me, it's okay. And it's like, I get really shy and timid and just like, are you sure it's okay? But like, I try to like break out of my shell and go ahead and text, and like I get a response within a few hours. And so yeah, it's been really nice to have like mentors from all over, and different enterprises in farming that I can lean on and ask about ask about anything. And also like being able to return the favor too, and tell people, yeah, just text me, I'll make sure to make time to respond. Like it won't be it'll be fine. And so yeah, I feel really fortunate to have the relationships and bonds that I've developed along the way, but it is also kind of hard to nurture that too, and to
Yeah, I think like remembering that the beautiful part about friendship is like accepting people the way that they are in that moment, and them showing up with the capacity that they have. And it seems like the, text me if you have questions feels like a really good way to like cultivate that relationship and meet y'all to like be able to meet where you're at in that moment too. So thank you for sharing that. So yeah, we're going to open up the breakout rooms now, and you're going to be able to choose which it's really hard to make that decision, but you're going to choose which farmer you'd like to talk a little bit more with. And we'll have until 6:25 to do that, and then we'll come back in for a little closeout. So Emmy, our amazing fundraising manager who's doing all the amazing behind the scenes work here, is going to go ahead and launch that breakout room. And you can say, there's a button that says join a breakout room in the bottom of your screen, and you just click the thing that says breakout rooms with the squares, and then you'll have the option. So I'm gonna go to mine. See y'all later.
It looks like there are still a few people who haven't joined breakout rooms. If you'd like to, you'll see the breakout rooms in the pop-up box there, and you can scroll down to join one of the rooms. Feel free to chat me if you have questions.
For the small group.
I think y'all, I mean, whatever questions y'all have for me, I think this is the time. There's no script or prompts.
Hi, Monica. I don't think you and I have met, but I've met your husband a couple of times, or your partner rather, in Joe. How has the transition been to the new property? I know last year you guys were kind of still doing some stuff right at Gaia Gardens, and then the big transition happened. So how has that been?
Right. It's a high tunnel that we're using as a prop house. And now we're like 95% done with our greenhouse. We're building more high tunnels in the field. We're cover cropping other fields and are about to open those up this summer. And then we're also building a barn, which is going to work as our wash pack. And we're trying to get our certification. So there's been a lot. It's been a good transition. It's been, as far as like Joe, Demetrius, and Judith, you know, becoming full-time at the new site, like pretty awesome. It's been great having their help. It's been great. Like we were already having a lot of meetings and conversations beforehand, but now like I feel like the communication is just a bit more streamlined. Like we all have a walkie-talkie now, which is a lot of fun, but also like the communication is just so much better now. So yeah, it's been good, and some speed bumps, and we've been working through it. So yeah.
Great, thanks. Yeah, I'm sure it just helps, even just having everybody at one place rather than having to kind of divide and conquer. You guys can all kind of mob up, because I know, you know, getting that infrastructure in place, like you said, you know, hoop houses, any sort of like, you know, permanent or semi-permanent structure, you know, that takes a lot of effort. And so having that stuff established now, kind of moving forward, you know, you guys are in a good place. Good. I'm glad to hear that.
Yeah, for sure. And we're working on a kind of a consensus model, or like a modified consensus model. So it's just a lot easier to make decisions when we're all there and present. So. And I also need to shout out Stephanie, because she's the new farmer at Gaia Gardens.
I have a relevant question. So now as a skilled and a experienced farmer, I don't know how many years you've been farming, but it's been a lot now. Do you still feel like you need to work extra hard to assert yourself and like establish that you know what you're talking about, like either in the outside community or within the farming community, or even within your own interpersonal dynamics in your life?
I find myself wanting to do that more with contractors. Or like, at least in like this immediate experience with building this new site, you know, just with the well drillers, the electricians, you know, there have been some projects that like we call it sponsoring, like one of us will sponsor a project or something. And so it's just like, yeah, communicating with contractors, I feel like I need to assert that like I know what I'm doing. And sometimes I'll even insert like it's like, well, you know, being a woman in ag, like sometimes people don't take me seriously. Are you not going to take me seriously? Like, kind of like, just like give them a little jab. But with my partners, like, I don't feel that way, or with like the farming community overall. I don't know. Or at least like, the organic farming community that we have here. Like, I don't feel like I need to do that anymore. Or I don't know, that I just maybe don't care anymore. Like, take it or leave it. This is me. Or just, but when it comes to contractors, like, I really don't want you trenching through my field. And that's happened. So.
I guess along those same lines, Monica, has it been a little bit of a culture shift being out in Mansfield versus being at Gaia? Just dealing with just a different community? Well,
I grew up in a pretty rural area, so it does kind of feel familiar. And I did live in the city for a long time, but I feel like, I don't know. Not really. Like, I feel like I can relate, to people in rural areas, or just kind of like, just navigate those conversations, or just, I mean, there are times where like things come up, like politics or something, and it's just like, okay, well, I'm how can we relate? Like, are you working class? I'm working class. All right. Like, there's a connection, or something like that. But yeah, I'm kind of used to being in rural areas too,
Well, I was curious, Monica, I know you all had a very successful fundraising campaign. Can you talk a little bit about, access to capital as a co-op? And do you think was that kind of special because you're a co-op?
Yeah, I do. We decided to sell preferred shares, which is something that Matthew and the Georgia Cooperative Development kind of introduced us to about. So preferred shares are shares in the business that people can buy that help, that gives us capital. And that's money that like we will give dividends, we'll give returns on their investment. And I guess I should back up a little bit. It's and maybe Matthew can help me fill in any gaps, but there in Georgia, in the state of Georgia, there is an SEC exemption. So people can invest and we don't have to like do a lot of paperwork and government stuff. And people are exempt up to a certain amount. I think that peak is $10,000. And as a co-op, as a group, we decided to do shares, or to price shares at $1,000, because we wanted like our community to be able to invest in us. We weren't looking for big time investors. We wanted this to be kind of like a community level investment. And we felt that that was a number that was low enough for our community to invest, but also not so low that like the administrative side of it wouldn't be a lot of work too, if that makes sense. Keeping track of like every investor also takes time and energy. So yes, the plan, what we've done is we've sold shares, and we will, over 10 years, pay them, or at year 10, we will start buying those shares back. And in between, we will give dividends, and we're shooting for 3%, which we kind of liken it to like a savings account. So if you have $1,000 in your savings account, why don't you just maybe think about parking it with us, and you'll get you'll get your 3%, or you'll get some farm credits until we're profitable, and yeah, we'll pay you back. So yeah, we were shocked at how successful it was. We kind of like shot for the moon, I guess, and we got a lot of feedback. We haven't sold all of them, There's still a few more to sell, and that's actually closing soon. But yeah, it's been really I don't know, just so much gratitude for people wanting to invest in us. Yeah. Are there any other questions on that? It sounds like we're about to break back out to the main room.
Just real quick, what's the minimum investment, by the way?
Oh, sorry. The minimum is 1,000.
Cool.
And then the maximum is 10,000 unless you are an accredited investor. And then like there's a process for that. But yeah, it was a really great tool, and I hope more farms try it out, because it was a great way to get some capital, and capital that, like, we're calling it's patient capital, you know, like we set the terms, we set the limits, we set the dividends. You know, you got to work within the legal parameters, but like it was super helpful.
All right, so everyone is coming back into the main session, and we are gonna, I think Emmy's gonna share her screen with a closing slide. But this was so awesome. I hope y'all had a chance to chat a little bit more with the panelists. It was a really beautiful space to share, virtual space that we got to share together, and I hope everyone found it as inspiring as I did. So thank you so much. And a big shout out to the American Farmland Trust for supporting us financially for this webinar, and Dr. Roesch-McNally giving her amazing wisdom at the beginning. And then, you know, we have a lot of great supporters at Georgia Organics as well. And I think we're gonna also see the poll one more time. But also, if you've loved what you've heard tonight, you know, Georgia Organics exists to support farmers, and we would love to have you involved in our organization. So please go ahead and go to georgiaorganics.org/membership if you're in a financial space to become one. We'd love to have you. And if you're not, you can reach out to us too. Just a reminder, this is who's in the room with us today. Good amount of farmers, gardeners, a good split between the nonprofits and eaters, the whole community. A lot of women in the room too, which is so awesome to see. So thanks y'all so much. And if you want to get in touch with us, you can. Emmy, if you want to, just the next slide, stay in touch with us on our social, our newsletter, The Dirt, and our Good Food for Thought events in the future. And with that, I hope that you have a great evening. Bye, everyone.
Thanks, y'all.
Bye, thank you.
Bye.
Thank you.
Have a good night,
Everyone.